The infamy and notorious name of Pablo Escobar has lived on since his demise in 1993. A figure immortalized in the popular culture, yet the story of his most trusted advisor remains untold. Welcome to Bizarre History. Today we'll be looking into Gustavo Gaviria, the money man behind the Medellin Cartel. Starting in the mid-1970s, the cocaine business was effectively under the ownership of the Medellin Cartel. While Escobar was without doubt the face of the brand and even known for filming his jaunts with Medellin colleagues, the all-important money predicated was taken care of by the quiet background figure Gustavo Gaviria. When the yearly pull of such an enterprise was $4 billion, the role Gaviria had was indispensable. It's been stated many times by the DEA in pursuit of the Medellin Cartel that Gaviria was viewed as the brain trust of the Medellin cocaine business. His knowledge of production, trade, and supply routes all the world over made him a man of incredibly high value in the eyes of the intelligence agencies. Who would have believed that just a couple of Envigado street kids would go on to gain so much power? Born 3 years earlier than his cousin Pablo Escobar, Gaviria was born on Christmas Day in 1946. They were noted as growing up together and being close in what was a relatively comfortable, higher-educated middle-class upbringing. Despite the stable environment, both Pablo and Gaviria made the decision to leave school to the shock of their parents, and soon began their exploration of crime and any business that could make them money. Theft was the initial start of their enterprise, and it was far from high concept or big hauls. The cousins from Envigado were known to steal tires from cars, when not stealing the cars themselves. They soon moved up to kidnapping as a way of extorting money out of people. Curiously, it began with them stealing and holding gravestones from local graveyards for ransom. This worked till presumably it didn't, and they soon began kidnapping people for ransom. Yet it wasn't like a life of crime isn't without some pretty obvious pitfalls. Both Escobar and his cousin, soon to be head of financial operations, were arrested during their formative criminal careers. It's understood facing and surviving arrest was something of a transformative experience for these cousins. Not turning away from the crime, they doubled down and set their sights on the drug trade. The cousins were on their way to starting an empire of their own, with Gaviria handling the financials. On the cusp of the 1980s, where the American demand for cocaine, between Wall Street and disco scene decadence, would go through the roof, the cousins were honing their trade. Gaviria popped his smuggling cherry in 1979, bringing 5 kilos over to Colombia from Peru. It was a deal that was the birth of the Medellin Cartel, taking over as the world's premier drug enterprise of its time. Being the brains of the enterprise, it's understood Gaviria had a grounded attitude. He guarded his life well, avoiding the lens of any warring faction or the attention of the government. Most importantly for the Medellin Cartel, Gaviria was a creative and proactive businessman. It should be said all these business practices were heavily illegal. The extent and innovation seen in the constant supply of cocaine seen in television depictions is down to Gaviria. If trade routes were disrupted, Gaviria had a response. Cocaine would not be stopped in the face of the world trying to stop it. If it couldn't be flown through its normal Florida route, it could be found stuffed in appliances traveling by cargo shipments. Perhaps most memorably, the soaking of cocaine into jeans is believed to have been an innovation under Gaviria's watch. Appliances, clothes, why stop there? Well, they didn't. Cocaine could be found at the time laced into wine, dried fish, fruit pulp, and coca. Come in the mid-1980s, Gaviria and Escobar were selling up to 80% of the cocaine supplied to the United States. This was only achievable through Gaviria's insight and savvy. Not to mention, as the DEA knew all too well, Gaviria's remarkable network of contacts all over the world. Yet, as their business grew, so did the perceptions of the Medellin Cartel and the pressures around them. These heady times of rising would be followed by a fall. Escobar was always wary of the imagery of the Medellin Cartel. He didn't want the crown and title of drug lord, or for that matter, world's first narco-terrorist. His effort to create imagery of a Colombian Robin Hood delivering his wealth directly to the comunas captivated him. $4 billion a year can build schools, stadiums, and, most impressively, housing for those in need. Yet when he turned his attentions into entering politics, he and his right-hand man had opposing views. Gaviria felt Escobar was not suited for politics and would never make a politician. But Gaviria was outright not in support of Pablo's political career in waiting. When Pablo was elected to the Colombian parliament in 1982, Gaviria was said to be furious, as much as he was glad to be left working behind the scenes. It's said that Pablo left Gaviria in charge of the cartel more or less, on his days spent on the campaign trail for election. Gustavo Gaviria's prediction that Escobar would be no fit in the world of politics came all too true. When Justice Minister Rodrigo Lara Bonilla saw through Escobar's good guy persona and banned him from the Colombian parliament, matters escalated, and only for the worst. Escobar retaliated by ordering the assassination of politicians, including Bonilla himself, something Gaviria only saw as petulant and dangerous reactions. These deaths meant the 1990s was open warfare between the government and the Medellin Cartel. The Search Block Division, a police division designed to bust the cartels, were as unrelentingly brutal as the people they were chasing. Not to be outdone, the Medellin Cartel in the 1990s killed politicians, attacked federal buildings, and brought down airplanes. Despite their differences in views and values of exposure and publicity, Gustavo remained the most trusted advisor and knowledgeable lieutenant in the cartel to Pablo Escobar. That's not to conflate him as a character without scruple or flaws, all individual and his own. Most inadvisably, Gaviria started a tryst with the sister of the Ocha brothers, a major drug smuggling family that had recently aligned with Escobar. This instance of, shall we say, making a mess where one sleeps was the making of Gaviria's undoing, and eventually the Medellin cartels. Gustavo was soon betrayed by Ocha brothers and the Cali cartel. His relationship with Maria Ocha was revealed to the Search Block, and he was a man with the biggest target on his back yet. Gustavo was killed by the Search Block in August 1990. The police insisted he was killed in a shootout, with the very term being viewed as a euphemism on the side of organized crime. Pablo Escobar and others were convinced it was a cover story for a man captured, tortured, and beaten to death. His body was buried in the very places where he and Escobar played as children in the Medellin hills. From his own security, Escobar could not attend the funeral and had to listen to the sermon over a radio provided for him. Escobar was said to be a changed and different man after the death of his cousin. Despite being in a form of war with the Colombian government, things were not to get better or lessen with Gaviria's passing. With the brain now taken out, Escobar's strengths, his personality, his capacity to order violence through sicario or hitmen, and his ability to coerce parties were the order of the day. Following the death of Gaviria, the end of violence between the cartel and the government, particularly with a recently installed new president, was a distant dream. The bloodshed and violence escalated. The country was due more in the following years. Escobar's cartel began to crumble, as well as his ability to control it, and he remained on the run until his death in 1993. Would you like us to cover more narcos? Let us know who you would like to see in the next video. Thank you for watching Bizarre History. See you next time.